Welcome everybody. Thank you again for joining. It's 10:30 Pacific time, so I am going to go ahead and get this next session of our masterclass underway. For those of you returning, welcome back. I appreciate you coming back to learn more about Banktivity. And for those joining us for the first time, also I extend a warm welcome. My name is Ian Gillespie. I'm president of IGG Software, and I'm going to be presenting today's masterclass. So today we're going to focus mainly on importing and payees. Before I dive deep into the content, I do want to just follow up on a few things, do a little housekeeping here. First of all, you can get links to all of the previous masterclass sessions by going to banktivity.com/webinars. We have session 1 and session 2 up there, and of course this session will be up there as well once the recording is finished. I also want to point out that I have been receiving questions to the webinars inbox. It's webinars@iggsoftware.com. And I have tried to incorporate some of those questions either into this session or answering some of those questions in a follow-up. And I also want to say that I feel like the format last week worked well, where I presented on the topics, and then at the end of the session, I carved out some time where we can, you all can ask questions, and I can answer them. I feel like I learn a lot from that. I hope you all do as well. So I'm going to stick with that format for today. So today, I'm going to start with follow-up on the previous webinars. There are some questions I want to answer and some things I want to go over. Then we're going to really jump into importing and payees, and we'll talk some about the import workflow and some best practices. So far in the last 2 previous sessions, we've covered documents, subscriptions, accounts, and transactions. And there are some things that I want to cover and some questions that people had related to those topics that I want to answer. One thing I want to do is I want to just point out that last week, as I was saying, this is the masterclass. I'm going to go and fast forward now. Anyways, main point here with housekeeping, banktivity.com webinars is where you find the other ones. Here's what we're going to be covering today, and here's where I was now with the follow-up. So last week, I was talking about if you want to track your safety deposit box. A kind attendee pointed out, it's not safety deposit box, right? It's safe deposit box, of course. So there it is, safe deposit box. Somebody wondered about what is the gold star next to a transaction date that you see sometimes. That little gold star that you can see next to that circle. That appears when you have a transaction that is dated in the future. So in this example, this one is February 14th, 2021. It's only January right now, and so you get a little gold star to indicate that that's in the future. Somebody wanted to know if you have transactions on the same day, but they seem like they're in the wrong order. How do you sort them? Well, if for transactions that occur on the same day, you can simply drag and drop them to rearrange them to the correct order. This can be particularly helpful with some investment transactions, right? If you happen to buy and sell a stock on the same day, that order is important. Somebody else wanted to know, how do I move my file from iCloud or similar, right? If you're currently storing it in Dropbox or something like that, and you want to move it to the local drive, because in the previous sessions, I talked about how that's kind of best practice, is to keep your documents on your local drive. It's just a file that you can find in the Finder, and you will just drag it to where you want it, like put it in the Documents folder. There's no real magic. It's just a file like anything else. And when you move that file, it will move all the file attachments that are inside that document. So if you are somebody who attaches receipts or other files to transactions, when you move the document, they all move together. This kind of brings up another interesting point if someone's wondering, well, how do I access those file attachments? Of course, you can see them in the app next to each transaction, but let's say the app wasn't launching or you were on an older version and you couldn't get it to launch. You wanted to get access to those file attachments. If you find that file, your document in the Finder on your Mac, you can. So here's an example. Let's say the file is called myfinances.bank8, right? If you right-click on it, hold down the Control key, and click with your mouse or trackpad, or if you have a 2-button mouse, it's the right click. You'll choose Show Package Contents, and that will open up the inside of the document, and in there you will see a folder called Public. That's for you all to look at, and if you open that up, then you'll see one called Transaction Attachment Cache, and in there you will find all of your raw files. So if you ever need to get access to them outside of the app, that's how you can do it. Right? It's a good tool if you ever have to do some kind of emergency recovery. Okay, somebody else asked about setting up a mortgage account, and I realized I didn't really go into this and in too great a detail, but last week we did cover accounts, and so I thought it would be worthwhile just doing a very quick demo of setting up a mortgage account, because I know that's quite common for a lot of people. So I'm going to go here to my handy dandy example file. The one we used some of last week is called My Finances, and I'll walk you through setting up a mortgage, talk about a few things. So I'm going to click the Add button, go to Add Account. Now, for this case, you could choose, this mortgage is at some financial institution, almost certainly is. You could choose that path and go that route. However, when you select this first button, the next option you're going to get is searching for your bank, and it's going to try and connect through direct access and all that. If there's one account type that I would suggest it might not be worth using direct access for and tracking it manually, it is a mortgage. And the reason is because mortgages are tricky with the compounding interest and paying it off, and what a lot of people think of as their mortgage payment can also include other fees like PMI, it's personal mortgage insurance. And so I actually think it's it's a good option to just say, this is not held in a financial institution. And what that really does behind the scenes is it skips the whole direct access setup or trying to connect through OFX. All right, so on the next screen, I'm going to choose mortgage, and I'm going to hit next. And now it's going to ask you what the balance is of this mortgage. So I'm just going to say this is, let's say, 250,000, and that's going to be as of today, the 19th. Going to hit done. Okay, here's where we kind of get into asking about the loan information. And so this is something that you would look to see what you currently pay for your principal and interest on this loan. Don't worry about any other things that you pay under this umbrella term mortgage right now. You'll have a chance to enter those later, but I'm just going to say, let's say we got 3% interest. Oh, sorry. Let's say that our principal that we pay, our principal and interest we pay is $1,000 and 3% interest. And the next due date is February 1st. That's great. Frequency is monthly. There are some other options here. If you have a non-standard 30-year fixed mortgage or 15-year fixed mortgage, for this example, I'm going to stick with a fixed mortgage. I'm actually going to say that my payment is, let's say, $1,200. I think that's probably a little more accurate. And I'm going to hit next. Okay. Now we get to enter in other information about this loan. And here, the first thing is, what category do you want the app to use for the interest payments? Because you have to remember, when you pay your mortgage, some of that goes to actually paying down the principal on the loan, and some of that is just the interest that you have to pay. So I'm going to see what we have here. I'm going to say this category is interest paid. That works. Okay, if you're the company that services your loan, if they are taking out money for escrow, like you're including in your payment money to cover your property taxes, or like I said, PMI, you would enter that here. So I'll choose one. Let's see what we have for taxes. I'm going to choose this category, taxes, and I'm going to say, yeah, you know what? I know that each month that I pay my mortgage, 100 of the dollars that I also pay goes to taxes. And you could enter, as many items as you need here. You can delete them and so on. And then I'm going to hit next. And now you kind of get a summary. On February 1st, this is how much is going to go towards principal, how much is going to go towards interest. This is the total principal and interest. We have $100 of other items, which we said was for property taxes. And so the total amount due is $1,300. If you pay extra principal, you could put that in here as well. For this example, I'm going to say that I don't. And now this $1,300 should match the amount that you pay every month to the company that services your mortgage, right? So if it's let's just say it's Wells Fargo, and you write a check every month to Wells Fargo, or more likely you have a direct debit from your checking account every month for $1,300. That's what you want to see here, is that same $1,300. Okay, on the next screen now, it asks you if you want to schedule the loan payments, and I strongly recommend you do this. So behind the scenes, after we leave this screen, the app is going to create a scheduled transaction for us. And I know we haven't covered scheduled transactions, but I wanted to point out that for most cases, you're going to want to use scheduled transactions. So here we just choose which account do you pay this from. I'm going to say my joint checking. The payee isn't Mortgage One. Let's just Wells Fargo, I guess. And yeah, I want the app to remind me 7 days in advance. This will affect whether or not you get a little blue icon up here reminding you, hey, you have a scheduled transaction you need to take care of. And now let's talk about this button here, schedule interest and fees separately. If you are going to use Banktivity to budget, which I recommend, then I strongly recommend you leave this checked, schedule interest and fees separately. And what this does is it allows you to set up your budget in terms of how much you just have to pay to Wells Fargo every month. And so in this example, it's like, yeah, you know what? I have to pay Wells Fargo $1,300 every month. I don't necessarily want to budget every month that, 600 of it goes to principal, 500 of it goes to the interest, and this much goes to the property tax, and this much goes to the insurance, and so on. And so by scheduling these things separately, the app will make multiple transactions for you behind the scenes to help keep all your numbers correct, so that it does calculate the interest correctly. And at the end of the year, you can see how much you paid towards your property tax and that sort of thing. But from the budget perspective, it lets you just say, you know what, every month I need to have $1,300 to pay towards my Wells Fargo mortgage. And so here, like I said, there's going to be multiple transactions. So I'm going to call this one, Wells Fargo. This is the other transaction that will get created. Wells Fargo interest and fees. And when I hit next, it asks me if I want to link to a real estate account, which we covered before. For this example, I'm going to skip it. Okay, so here is your mortgage. You'll see that you have a negative $250,000 balance. That's money you need to pay off, so it's mortgage. And if you click this button here, this is the button that shows you your upcoming scheduled transactions. And we will cover scheduled transactions in much more depth at a future date. But I want to point out here that Banktivity has made these 2 scheduled transactions for you. It's actually this one and this one. So here is the $1,300 that you're going to pay every month. And from the budget perspective, you want to just think of it as I need to come up with $1,300. And what that looks like is a transfer out of your checking into your mortgage. But whenever that transfer lands in your mortgage, that reduces the principal amount of the loan, which isn't correct. We don't get to pay $1,300 every time. And so what the app does is behind the scenes is it creates another transaction that's going to post to the mortgage account. You can see that right here. And this is a split, and some of it is for the interest and some of it is for the taxes. So when you post both of these, which is I'm just going to do that now so you can see, you'll see that this one, this would be your payment from the joint checking account. You can see that's where it's coming from. It's a transfer. It lands in here, and it's a deposit of $1,300, which would incorrectly adjust all your principal. And so then this other transaction gets created to offset, to make sure that your principal really just gets adjusted the right amount, and you accurately track how much is going towards interest and how much is going towards taxes. Okay, so that was a bit of a long demo for the follow-up, but I think it was worth covering. I'm actually just going to delete this account now because I don't need it for the rest of my demos. Okay, so back to our slides. So another person wanted to know about how do I know how my account is connected? Is my account connected using direct access? Is it connected using direct connect, also sometimes known as OFX? Is it not connected at all? And so to see that, what you do on the Mac is you go to the account in question, you double click it, and you'll get a popover that shows you the status. So here is a screenshot of that popover. In this case, you can see this is connected as a direct download, also known as OFX, and that's how this account is connected. On iOS, you can check as well. And in this case, you would click, you tap to the account that's of interest. Then you click the little edit button there. It's that little pencil in the square. And you get this screen next, and you'll notice down at the bottom, there's a section called Bank Info. And in this case, it says direct access. That is how this account is connecting. Okay, that is the follow-up I wanted to cover. Now I want to move on to importing. Before I jump into kind of the nitty-gritty of how the import system works, let's just talk about the different types of ways you can import data into the app, and that is, different ways you can just get data into the app. And one, you might argue this isn't importing, but right, you can just manually enter transactions. Just for completeness, I'm adding that here. One of the most common ways is you set up your account to connect through what we call direct access, and that's where the app goes out and automatically downloads transactions from your bank using our backend provider. You might also have your account set up, I shouldn't say, the other way to have your account automatically download transactions is through direct download. That's something that is only supported on Mac right now. The other way you might do it is just import a file. You might log into your bank's website, download a file, and import it. Here are the file types that Banktivity can import: QIF, OFX, QFX, and CSV. I want to point out that CSV is only supported for non-investment transactions. And to make this process easier of importing files, you might be using the built-in browser that's in Banktivity, where you can log into your bank's website, click the right buttons and links in your bank's website. The transactions automatically download in one of these file formats. The app recognizes this download and kicks off the import. Of course, you might be using Safari or Chrome or some other web browser to log into your bank's website and download a file there and import that file. Those are really the main ways to get the data into Banktivity. Now I want to cover two different scenarios for importing. And one is importing data into an existing account, and the other is importing data into a new account. And I want to talk about these separately because behind the scenes, they do different things. And I'm actually going to cover importing into an existing account first, because that is by far the most common task that you will be having Banktivity do. You only set up a new account hopefully once, and then once it's set up, you just continually import into it. So let's cover this. When you're importing into an existing account, the app looks for matches to existing transactions. Then after it does its little algorithm of looking for possible matches, it imports the new transactions. And the account balance then changes based on those transactions. I think it's pretty straightforward. So here is a quick example with a credit card. Let's say your current balance on your credit card is negative 2,000, right? It's money you owe, so it's negative. And you're importing data that has $300 worth of charges spread across 10 different transactions. And this could be coming from direct access, a file you're importing, doesn't really matter. It's all kind of the same. There's 10 transactions for a total of $300 worth. But it notices that, $100 of those transactions already match up with transactions that you have entered manually. When you went shopping, you said, hey, I'm spending $100 at the store. I'm going to enter it right now. And so ultimately, the resulting balance ends up being $2,200 because it matched some of the existing transactions that were there, and you get this net balance change to net balance change of $200. Okay, so that's kind of the what the steps and what the app goes through during that import process into an existing transaction. But now let's talk about what about when you're creating an account. When you walk through the account setup assistant, right? It's when you just like I showed you with the mortgage, you hit that plus button, you hit add account, the sheet drops down. That's what we call the account setup assistant, and it kind of walks you through all the different ways you might set up your account. Well, a really common scenario is to, pick the bank that your account is at and log in and connect through direct access or OFX and get your data that way. When that happens, we get some information from the bank that helps us figure out what state this account should be in. For example, we get the current balance of the account, and then we also get some number of transactions. Now, I say some number because this is something that's out of our control, right? We can't say, hey, you know what? We're setting up an account and I want a year's worth of transactions. The reason is because it depends on how you're connecting, and it depends on what the bank allows. And so we request, I think we request as many as we can get, but we usually get somewhere between 30 and 90 days worth of transactions. This comes up sometimes. People are saying, hey, I'm starting Banktivity and I want to download all my transactions of 2020 when setting up my account. And that's usually just not possible. If you wanted to log into your bank's website and see if you could export all those transactions for a whole year, you could do that. But for the common case of, I'm just setting up a new account through direct access, you're not going to get a year's worth of transactions. So let's run through an example of what the app does in this case. Like I said, it sees the information we get from the ultimately, comes from the bank, says what the current balance is. And so it says, hey, you know what? This account you're setting up, the current balance right now is $500. But we might get 30 days worth of transactions that have a total of $2,000 worth of charges or net change, right? Could be some deposits, could be some withdrawals. And so what the app does is it makes an adjustment for $2,500 so that once all those new transactions are imported, the net result ends up being $500. Now, the reason why you want to care about this is because, well, I mean, this is the masterclass, right? And this is kind of the things we want to dive into. But it's also important to know if you're setting up a new account for the beginning of the year, don't get fixated on, I need to have my exact balance, what it was on January 1st, and I only want new transactions going from January 1st onward. Trust the system, set up the account, it'll get as many transactions as it can, it'll give you the right balance, and then when you need, if it's okay if it goes back in this case, back to 2020 and gets a few transactions from before then, that's fine. Because really, when you run a report for 2021, it's going to ignore all those transactions anyways. Importing is really common, so it's good to really understand what's going on here. And it's also important to understand this because it's the same framework that's used for investment accounts. Both of my examples there weren't for investment accounts, but investment accounts, they're more complex. And so let's just take a look at what that would look like. Okay, when you're creating an investment account during the import, and you're going to import transactions into it as a part of that creation process. Again, as I mentioned before, the app will make a special adjustment transaction that ultimately results in the final balance of your account being correct. But for investments, it has to make other adjustments as well because you might have holdings. So for example, in this case, let's say you set up an account and you bought many years ago, let's say you bought shares of Apple and T is AT&T. We don't necessarily know when you bought those shares because it was from a long time ago. We don't know how much you paid for those shares. The bank is not telling us, but we know you have those shares and that's important. So what the app does is it makes adjustment transactions that represent the buys of those shares. And in this case, it's saying, hey, we know you have 248 shares of T, so here's a buy. There's no price because we don't know. And we know you have 60.108 shares of Apple. We don't know anything about the price. And this is good in that it'll tell your Banktivity will tell you what your exact the market value is of those prices of those securities once you download the stock prices, and you'll have a very good picture of what the total value is of that account. But you're still missing some important information. You're missing the cost basis of these two securities. Well, we've added a way to make it pretty easy to address that. If you go to the account menu, there is a menu item called Fix Cost Basis. So you select the account in question after it's been created, and you say, hey, I want to fix the cost basis in this account, and it'll go through and look for shares that it doesn't have any cost basis information about. And so for this example, you'll see there's the T at the top, and there is the Apple, in the middle row there, and you would just click Edit, and then you'd have a chance to say, hey, I bought this many shares on this date for this price. Now, how you get access to that information is, that's going to vary. You might have old paper records, or hopefully you can go into your bank's website and tell it to, look up how long ago you bought those securities and get the price information that way. So it is a little bit of a manual process, but it does get them fixed up, and then going forward, you'll have very, very accurate record keeping. Okay, so now let's talk about what happens during the actual import process. I tossed around, hey, there's a current balance, and we make an adjustment, and these transactions come in the amount. But now let's look at kind of the nitty-gritty of when those transactions are coming in. So let's say that you are importing some data. It doesn't matter if it's really direct access or from a file or OFX. And the payee, let's just say there's one transaction that's importing. The payee is AMZ MKT star 000 Oregon. Right, this is Amazon Marketplace is what I know, but a lot of times the bank gives us something like this. Well, when this comes into the app, there are something called import rules, and the app runs these import rules against the transactions coming in, and hopefully something like this comes out. That's Amazon, and the category in this case was groceries. So that is what happens. So now I want to focus a little bit on, let's talk about those import rules, because this is important. It's what takes data that looks unsightly, hard to understand, and makes it come in looking very nice and clean, and it saves you time. So to understand the import rules, we need to focus on this notion of the payee within the app. And the way to think about a payee is that it is like a template. So, for example, here is a screenshot of what a payee looks like in the app. Okay, in this case, the payee is Bedrock, and you'll see that the transaction type is charge, the category is clothing, shoes, and the amount associated with it is $85. Then you'll see over on the right, I have these two arrows shooting off. And this is saying, hey, here is a payee, and this is like a template. If I type in Bedrock into the app, it's going to autofill with charge. It's going to use the right category, and it's going to enter in the amount that we last spent at this payee, which in this case was $85. But a payee can also have import rules associated with it, and it can also be scheduled and be used as a scheduled transaction. So just kind of give you to show you how this might shake out in your file a little bit is here's an example of 4 different payees that might be in your file. We have one that is Apple at the top, and the checkbox there under import rule means, yeah, this one has an import rule. If it encounters something that looks like Apple in the future, it's going to change the title of that transaction to Apple cleaned up nicely. We might have another payee that is Acme, and it's just a payee. It doesn't know anything about any import rules, and it's not scheduled. And then we have AT&T, which has both, and then another one here, let's say Ace Hardware, which just has an import rule. Now, the app really does a pretty good job of just making and managing these payees for you. I want to point that out. You don't need to go into the app and enter in each payee manually. What happens is as you clean up a transaction, it creates a payee behind the scenes for you. So, all right, let's jump into a demo. Okay, so here is our file, and I'm going to go to this Visa account, and I'm going to create a new transaction. Right here, it says payee. And if I click in here, there is a drop down of all the different payees that are in this Banktivity document file. There's a whole bunch, and I can pick one of these. And when I pick one, it's going to autofill a bunch of stuff. It's going to say, hey, this was last time you went to the food co-op, it was groceries, it was $78, and the transaction type was withdrawal. So one of the things I want to cover is, where does this list come from? How do I know what's in here? What if there's something in here I don't want anymore? Some people are really fine just letting the system manage the payees for them. And then there are some customers that really like to go in and fine tune this list. I fall into the camp more of just kind of let the system do its thing. And even with do not disturb, I get do not disturb messages coming in. I tend to be the person who, I don't worry about it too much, but I know there are other people that do. And so I showed you how to click this button and get the list, but if you just start typing, the list gets filtered and you can move the keys around and pick different things. So like if I choose target, it's gonna fill in a bunch of splits for me, and that's great. But if you wanna manage that list, I'm going to show you how to do that. You go to View, go to Payees, Schedules, and Rules, or you can go to, takes you to the same place, Settings, Payees, Schedules, and Rules. And you'll see at the top here, we have all payees. This is what is going, these are what are used to fill that list. All these things you see here. And these are your payees, and these are essentially the templates of transactions. Now, if you want to just see the payees that are scheduled, you can hit here and go to Scheduled Transactions, and you get a subset. If you want to just see the payees that have an import rule associated with them, you can click here and you get the ones that have just the import rules. Now, if one of these is not quite right, you can double click it and edit it just like a transaction. And we made them look like transactions on purpose, right? They're very similar. It's a template for a transaction, if you will. So here is Ashland Hardware, and maybe say, I did buy something household there one time, but really what I mostly buy here is, I don't know, recreational equipment, recreation hobbies, because you're always buying golf balls there, whatever. And so it edits very similar to a transaction. You can add splits, you can delete splits, you get the same little category pop over or pop up here to choose the category and so on. Okay, now I'm going to just jump back to my Visa card, and I want to show you how the system tries to be smart when auto-filling in a transaction. So if it's a brand new transaction and you just start typing something in, it is going to change the category, and it's going to pre-populate the amount based on however much money you spent at this payee vendor the last time you shopped there. Now, if I then say, okay, this is Ace Hardware, but this isn't miscellaneous expenses. This was groceries. And then you go back and say, what? Actually, this wasn't Ace Hardware. This was something else. This was let's say this is Acme. You'll notice we don't blow away that category again. Once you said, hey, the category is groceries, we aren't going to blow it away again after you've edited that. And so, depending on the circumstances, the app really tries to do a good job of pre-filling things without blowing away data that you have manually, explicitly entered. One other thing I want to show too is that if you let's leave the Visa account and go to this checking account, and if you add a transaction here, and you enter in a payee that has a check as its transaction type, I'm going to fake it by just choosing check. It will autofill the next upcoming check number as well. And so you can see the last check number here was 5051, and this one's 5052. So yeah, it's Green Mountain Power. So here I'll add a new transaction. Let's say this is Green Mountain Power. You can see autofill it to check and put in autofill that check number 5052. So it tries to be smart about autofilling the right thing. Okay, so that is just sort of what the payees are, where they exist in the app, and some of the interaction between the payees and the autofill system. Now I want to talk a little bit about the actual import process. So I'm going to go to this account here. Right, so this is it's a credit card account, but you'll see there's no current balance. I just set this up for the demo. Don't get hung up on that fact. And I have a file that I'm going to import, but please keep in mind that this import could have been through direct access, or it could have been through importing an OFX file. So here is my file. In this case, I'm just going to drag and drop it right onto the app. And it says, hey, you want to import this into Platinum MasterCard? And I'm going to say yes. And you'll see here that it imported some transactions. And you know what? They're kind of ugly. So this would be my typical workflow. This indicates to me the app didn't recognize these payees based on the import rules. So I need to fix them up. And that just happens sometimes. So this is a Vista, and that's utilities, it's the gas company. This is just straight up Apple, and this is entertainment for one of their subscriptions or something. Amazon is just going to be plain old Amazon, and that was household. REI is just REI, not that big long rei.com and all those crazy characters. And let's say this was some clothing. And this is just what I call the Grange Co-op. And that's where we buy pet food. So that's, let's say, we'll give that the category pets and pet care. I'm going to hit save. There are all those transactions. That looks much cleaner to me. That's how I like my data looking. I left these all as withdrawal. You could have changed them to charge. That probably would have been, if your data file has charge in it, that would be an appropriate thing to do. The math is all going to be the same. So now I'm going to delete all those transactions. And I'm just going to show you what happens if I import them again. So now let's pretend that a month has passed, and I'm importing transactions again, or maybe it's a couple weeks, whatever. And here are my new transactions. They import, and now they come through. Blah. They got all cleaned up, except for REI. This happens sometimes, right? There's something about the way this is formatted that the import rule still couldn't figure it out. And to be honest, this does just happen sometimes. The import rules are not 100% all the time. And part of that is what the bank ends up sending us, or what is in that import information, can change, and it can make the import rule not recognize what's there. So if this was my real file, I would just say, hey, you know what, this is REI. And it takes, a split second to fix it and autofill in the right category and that thing. But hey, not too bad. 4 out of 5 coming through perfect is great. All right, I do want to mention this new badge. You'll notice that there are 5 new badges because I just imported 5 new transactions, and you'll notice there is a 5 over here. This 5 with the green circle means that there are 5 new transactions. That new badge will go away in 24 hours. There's not a way to force it to go away currently, something we have considered doing but has not risen up on the priority list high enough. And so just note that in 24 hours, those badges will go away and this number here will go away. And the point of this is that if you have many accounts and you refresh them all by clicking the refresh button, you might get several accounts that import new transactions, and that badge is good to know, hey, it indicates, hey, I need to go to this account and I got to look at these new transactions and decide, hey, are they categorized right? Oh, I don't recognize that. Oh, wait, this doesn't look right. I should call the bank or whatever. The other thing I want to point out is that these have all come through with little check marks. that means that the bank thinks these have cleared at the bank. The bank is saying, hey, this is a real transaction in your account. Sometimes when you import, the transaction might come through without the check mark. In that case, that means the bank says, hey, this is a pending transaction. It's probably going to go through for this amount, but it might not. And so I just wanted to point out that that is what that check mark means and how you can change it. Now, some people will see a double check mark here, and that actually means that you've reconciled that transaction to a statement. I'm mentioning the double check marks now to fully cover all the different things you might see here, but I'm going to save reconciling for another session. All right, now I'm going to jump back to my slides. And now I'm going to talk about kind of handling some common scenarios, right? That importing of that file, that came through looking, that was pretty easy. Everything was just there and it looked great and okay. But sometimes things don't always work out that way, right? What happens if we match a transfer incorrectly and you're like, wait a minute, this is saying that this is a transfer to like this account, but no, this transaction came through, this wasn't a transfer, this is something different. I want to cover kind of how you correct that. I also want to talk about how you merge transactions and when and why you do that. And then I'm also going to cover the import preferences we have, because we've over the years we've added a lot of different preferences to really try and let people fine tune the app to their workflow. And then I'm also going to talk about just sort of the intention of our import rule system, sort of why we designed it the way we did. And we're going to go back to the demo. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to my savings account. Sorry, and I'm going to jump to this checking account. And I'm going to enter in a transfer. So let's say that you know that the other day you transferred some money to the savings. It's not a groceries, it's checking. Right, I put in the account name under the category, that'll make it a transfer. I set this to transfer just to visually tell me, hey, this is a transfer. And in this case, it is $60 coming out of my checking account and it's going into the savings. Sorry, this should not be checking, this is savings. And let's say this was on January 3rd. And I'm gonna hit save. I'm gonna delete this Wells Fargo transaction because this was from my mortgage demo. Get rid of that. Okay, so you'll see we have this running list of transactions, and down here on the 3rd is this transaction that has not been cleared. It appears in bold. It has a circle instead of a check, and it's a transfer for $60. Now I'm going to import this same file. Oops. Import the same file we've been working with. There we go. It's going into the checking. And now you'll see that there are some new badges. That's great. And then there's this one here that is match. I'm like, wait a minute. I thought that, I didn't expect it to match $60. I expected it to be a $60 charge at some other store. So I know this isn't correct. This was $60 at the Grange Co-op that I spent. So the system will, it will get this wrong at some point, right? We cover a lot of scenarios. It's a pretty smart algorithm, but it is not perfect. Now, so one way you can just verify that, hey, this match doesn't make sense. I'm not sure what's going on here. So here's a nice little trick. You double click the transaction. And if your transaction was imported, you'll get a little eye here. And if you click it, it'll show you kind of the raw information that was imported. So in this case, it says, hey, the date was on the 3rd, but it was for the Grange Co-op for $60, and it came from OFX, either a file or direct connection. So this is where I go, all right, this isn't right. This isn't right. This was not that transfer. This was the Grange Co-op. So what I'm going to do is change all these fields, right? This is not transfer to savings. This is Grange Co-op. And yeah, this is going to be pets. And you'll notice that as soon as I change that category name away, so it was saying, hey, this was a transfer to savings, and now I'm trying to change it to a regular category. It says, okay, hold on. This was a linked transfer. Now, do you want to unlink the transfer, or do you want to really just delete the whole notion of the transfer? And in this case, because it was an incorrect match, I think it's easier to just delete the whole transfer. There we go. And this is pets. And I'm going to hit save. All right, so now this is right. It still says match there because it did match with that source. Don't get too hung up on that. But now the main thing is what you want to do is you do know that there was a transfer. So really you should just recreate that transfer and say, hey, you know what, there is a transfer to my savings. And it was for $60. And then there's that transaction. Now, this example is not necessarily the best because really, or I said this could happen for sure, but there's some kind of problem here, right? This was January 3rd. So this was, over 2 weeks ago. And this still has not cleared by the bank. So that indicates something. Like if I saw this in my own file, I would probably log into my bank's website and go, okay, did that transfer really happen? Maybe I forgot to hit the final confirm button when I was trying to do that transfer on my bank's website. If it did, then I would, okay, well, I need to download the transactions covering this date range again and find out, why the transaction didn't download and match it up correctly. So that's just kind of how you can get out of that situation. Now, I also want to point out a really nice feature that I use a lot, and that is you'll notice that we have these new badges interspersed in with some older transactions, and then we have this one transaction here that hasn't even cleared. And if you go up here to the transactions tab button and click the down arrow, you can choose this group, new, and uncleared. And this will create a section at the top of the view that pulls in all of your transactions that are either new or have some other kind of badge, like a match, and any ones that are uncleared. And so here you can this is an easy way to look at, okay, here are the transactions I need to deal with right now. And you don't have to worry about scrolling through trying to find anything else you might have missed. And so I use this a lot. If you want it to go away, you can just uncheck it and it goes back to how it was. All right, I'm going to delete these just for now. They're just part of the demo. And now I'm going to show you merging and why you want to merge. So here I am over at this checking account. And let's say that I wrote this check back in December to this farm for $60. They haven't cashed it, right? And that's why it's not cleared. Whenever I've done an import from the bank, it's never come through and matched. And they're taking their grand old time on cashing that check. That's fine, that happens. So let's say then I import some transactions. Again, this is my same file. I'm gonna import them into my reserve checking. They come through, REI is being stubborn. And then I see this, hey, here's the $60, right? It says, in this case, it says Grange Co-op, but let's just say it came through as like share draft, checking, XXXYY. And maybe it likely would not come through. It'd probably come through without any category and just show up as a withdrawal. So this is, if I had a, the perfect example, a transaction might show up like this, and I go, oh, wait a minute. I know that shows that the cash got cashed, but here's the check right here. So this is a case where you want to merge two transactions. You manually entered in this check transaction, and now you've imported the match, and so you want to combine these to one. You don't want to have to delete this one and then edit this one to be the right thing. So what you can do is simply grab the one that you want to merge this one into the existing. You take this, you drag it on top of the one you want to merge into, and release, and it's going to say, hey, we're going to keep the Wandering Roots farm, and we're going to delete the other one and merge the information. I'm going to say perfect, and now you'll see that it changes to match, and it's all cleaned up, and we're good to go. A couple of things about the merge. You cannot merge just any two transactions. For example, here is, Amazon and Apple. I can't merge these. I can rearrange what order they're in because they both happened on the 4th, but I can't merge these. And the reason is because the system knows that not one of those was entered manually. So you basically have to have one transaction that was entered manually and then another transaction that was imported, and the system lets you merge those. Okay. Now I'm going to change gears a little bit with my demo. And I'm going to talk about import preferences. And this really gets into kind of the import rule creation and that sort of thing. Now you'll notice that when I go to edit REI, we kept wondering, like, how come this REI keeps coming through as not being cleaned up? I thought I edited it and I gave it a name. Well, you'll notice that there's a checkbox here, create import rule. And this was turned off. And so when you edit a transaction and that is off, and then you hit save, it's going to update the payee behind the scenes, but it's not going to create an import rule for it. So this time I'm going to say, yeah, you know what, create the import rule, and I'm going to hit save. And now, I'm just going to watch this. I'm going to delete this transaction, and I'm going to import my file again. And don't worry, it's not going to import duplicates because the system identifies all those ones that have already imported. But this time I'm going to import, and REI comes through all nice and cleaned up. Yay! So this is something to pay attention to. This import rule, create import rule, the default state is we just leave it checked. But if you uncheck it for one of your payees, the next time we encounter that payee, it's going that a transaction that matches up with that payee, it's going to be unchecked. So most of the time I have this on. You might just find times when you're like, you know what, I don't want you to try and fix up a transaction. It seems to be always getting it wrong. In that case, uncheck import rule, hit save. Then the next time that you import something that it thinks is REI, it's going to just be like, you know what, you don't want me to apply the template. Just do your thing. All right, now I'm going to go to preferences. And here's the little preference window, and I'm going to go to import. And you'll notice that down at the bottom, there's a lot of options about import rules and that sort of thing. So if you don't want the app to ever try and clean up your transactions, you want raw data coming in from whatever import process you choose, just uncheck this, right? And then it won't try and clean up your imported transactions ever. If you feel like the transfers, it's not getting those right, maybe you're doing a lot of transfers for similar amounts and it's not working for you, you can turn that off. If you just don't want import rules ever applied, right? So I turned off the import rule on just this one payee, but if you don't want it ever applied, there's a checkbox for that. And then there's one here too, that if you feel like sometimes a transaction is coming in that you don't recognize and it's giving it some bizarre category and you're like, where did that come from? Our direct access provider gives us a suggested category for a lot of our transactions. And so if you want to turn that off, there's that checkbox there. And so this is, we call it use bank categories when available. And it's basically, if the import contains category information, we try and use that if this checkbox is checked. All right, I mentioned pending transactions. Maybe you don't want your pending transactions to be imported, right? They import, they appear for a while, and then they disappear because a pending transaction is just, hey, we think this transaction is going to happen, and then when the real one does, that pending one disappears and the real one appears. So you can turn that off. You can also turn this on and off on iOS so that it matches up. And then if you just don't want the system to ever create the import rules, you can turn that off as well and create, and then it's going to be up to you to create any rules you want completely manually. Now, I'm going to show you this gets into my next section about, and my final section about the import rule intentions. In a perfect world, customers would leave this checked. Almost all of them do. And when you edit a transaction, you would leave this checked, and you clean up a transaction, you edit it, and then the next time you import something that looks similar, it cleans it up for you and it looks great. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Some payees change too much, or it's too variable, or our system isn't catching it. You can go in and change the import rules and edit them. And I'm going to show you where to do that. And I'm also going to give you a big kind of, proceed at your own risk. I feel like I need to show you where the import rules are because this is the masterclass and I've been talking all about them and when they get created and all that stuff. But they use regular expressions behind the scenes to do the matching, and regular expressions are just complex and hard and easy to get wrong. So let me just jump to, I'm going to filter out all my payees that have import rules, and let's go to REI because that was the one we were just looking at. Oh, I turned it off. That's not there. Let's go to there we go. There's Amazon. I'll do that one. This is one of the things we just imported. All right, with the import rules selected, if you hit edit, you're going to get a popover and you're going to see a string like this, right? This is a regular expression, okay? Like that's not human friendly, that's computer friendly, right? And it's basically saying, I'm not an expert at regular expressions at all, but it's basically saying if the imported transaction payee matches, oops, shouldn't have selected that, matches this regular expression, then we have a match, and I want the transaction to look like this. Just say Amazon, make it a withdrawal, category household, and then of course we won't change the amount during an import because we look at the amount that's associated with the transaction that's being imported. But that is where those regular expressions are. Our intention of this system was really just edit the transactions as they come in. The system gets better and better the more you edit the transactions. So the next time I import Amazon, it might be a little different. And it depends if you bought something from, maybe you bought something for your Kindle, and so it doesn't come through as Amazon Marketplace, it comes through as Amazon Digital Services, right? And that's going to be, it's not going to catch that. And so you just edit it, and behind the scenes, it'll make another import rule, and it'll say, okay, well, when anything looks like Amazon Marketplace or anything looks like Amazon Digital Services, then apply this template. Our intention was not for customers to go in and edit those regular expressions because it's really easy to enter something by mistake where all of a sudden any transaction that gets imported is, the import rule will always catch it and change it to something or another. I'm showing you where they are. because this is the Masterclass, and I don't feel like I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't show you. But our intention is edit the transactions as they come in. The system gets better. We've given you a lot of levers to fine tune it, like being able to turn off an import rule for a specific payee. We've given you the preferences of about transfers and not, and include pending and just don't apply rules at all. And so there's a lot of options there. I strongly recommend you follow kind of the spirit of what we're trying to do. I think you'll save yourself more time in the long run. Okay, the last thing I want to show you, and then we'll go to some questions, is just that you can batch edit transactions. So let's say you import a whole bunch of transactions and you want to change all the categories at one time. You select all the ones you want. Sure, I'm holding down the command key and I'm selecting this mix and match of transactions. I then press down and hold the control key. I click. I get this contextual menu, and you can see we can batch change the category. We can batch change the transaction type. If these were security transactions, you could change that. Or we can say, hey, change the payee. And then a sheet comes down and it says, hey, this will change the payee for all of your transactions. So I could then enter, say, all of these are supposed to be to Adobe. Now, I'm not going to hit change payee because they would all change, but you could do that. So there are some powerful ways there to edit a whole bunch of transactions at once. You can also just mark them all as cleared or uncleared. You can add tags across a selection. You can delete a whole bunch at once. Just there's some good options in there, so I did want to point that out. Okay, now with that, I would like to open up to questions. I'm going to pull up my little window that shows me what people are asking. I'm sorry I didn't have the video going on at the very beginning, everybody. Second time, I feel like I nailed it. Third time, it's like, not so good. Fourth time, I'm gonna have it dialed in really well. All right. Somebody asks, what is X match? I've seen this a few times. All right, so here we have this match. The X match happens when we basically match the other side of a transaction. Let's see if I deleted it now, so it won't show up. But it basically means that we matched a transfer from the other account. Somebody asked, am I able to add transaction types? Not currently. We have thought about how to do this, and the system, it's within the realm of possibility, and we can make sync work and all that, but it just hasn't been, a popular enough feature request for us to do that. Somebody says, I have my document in Documents, but I also use Mac OS's iCloud Sync for the desktop and Documents. Do your same precautions apply? This is Joel. Joel, I think that's fine. I do the same thing, right? My desktop and Documents sync as well. I haven't had any problems. Every once in a while I'm using Banktivity, it'll say, hey, this document was saved by an outside application. Do you want to save your changes or discard? And that basically means, the Apple sync system changed the file out from underneath us, and just always hit save. Just say, no, I want to save what I'm doing right now. And that'll be what you want. And I'm going to actually just put an A next to each question I answered so that in my system I can see it more easily which ones I've already answered or not. Robert asks, regarding import rules, can you set up rules for having cashback percent amounts to be recorded automatically? The short answer is no. And really the way the import rule works is they're designed to edit and tweak a transaction automatically coming in, but we never change the amount. All right, so someone asks, can you merge or delete duplicate rules? This is Mark. I'm going to kind of go back to what I said. The intention is edit the transactions when they come in and they aren't what you want, and let the system make the import rules behind the scenes. If you wanted to do that, you certainly can. You can go to import rules, you can go to edit. Here's a couple for Act Blue, and you could just hit delete, and that rule is gone. I'll delete another one, that rule is gone. All right, so that payee no longer has any import rules associated with it. You notice that it disappeared out of the system. Kathy asks, should reconciled transactions be locked? Well, they are not right now, but if you do, if you try and edit the amount of a transaction that's been imported, you'll get a warning. Hey, this has been cleared by your bank. Are you sure you want to do this? And so you'll get the same warning for a reconciled transaction, but they aren't locked in such a way that you can't edit them again. Let's do a little window management here. Janine just wants to know, how do you find those import rules? So all this is managed under, if you go to settings, payees, schedules and rules, and then you can look at all your payees by clicking this button. You can look at just the payees that have scheduled that are scheduled to fire at a certain time, that are scheduled to post at a certain time. And then you can look at just the payees that have import rules associated with them. Let's make another little note here. Somebody asked, how many total master classes will there be? I'm going to do 3 more, and then I'm probably going to take a break and then come back and do some more. All right, somebody asked, this is from Mike, if you enter a transaction into the wrong account, how do you copy it to where it should be? So right now, the way to do that is with cut and paste, right? So let's say this REI is in the wrong transaction. I'm gonna just hit Command X, which cuts and says, hey, do you wanna delete it? Yeah. And then I want it to say to be in this visa, I'll hit paste. And then it shows up down here. I want to say that's how you do it right now. We are actually working on a feature right now that'll be coming out in the next, the next little while, where you can just drag and drop a transaction from one account to another, and it'll just move it to that account. I do want to point out, if you came late or want to watch any of this again, you will be able to go to banktivity.com/webinars, and you'll be able to, review this webinar there. Let's pick out another one here. Can I merge a transaction from one account into another? This, I guess I pretty much already answered this one. If you need to move in it right now, for the versions that are in the wild, if you need to move an account from one, if you need to move a transaction from one account to another, the easiest is to cut and then paste. We are working on drag and drop support coming soon. All right, Julie asks, why do some accounts require refreshing before transactions are shown in Banktivity? Sometimes this change was made a couple of days ago. So the mechanism for, let's talk about the two different ways to automatically download transactions. So with Direct Connect and OFX, our app, literally talks directly to your bank and says, hey, give us the transactions. And it's up to the bank of when they want to make those transactions available. For direct access, our backend provider, we talk to our backend provider, and our backend provider talks to your bank about getting the transactions. And so basically, when you click the refresh button up here, the app first goes out and just says, hey, give me the transactions that are readily available. And that's basically ones that are kind of in the cache and they're just right there. When that is done, we then tell our backend provider, okay, we got all the recent transactions out of the cache. Now go out and do a full refresh, right? Like log into the bank's website, scrape the screen if you need to, connect however you connect, but get us the most recent stuff. And then that most recent stuff gets put into the cache. And then the next time you click the button, you're going to get that recent stuff from the cache. And then the process repeats itself and it says, hey, go out and get all the most recent transactions. And so that, in a nutshell, that's sort of how the system works. Now we are, working on moving to a brand new direct access system, and I expect that behavior is going to change dramatically, and hopefully mostly for the better. Let's find some more. Somebody says, Michael, within your advanced preferences, can you explain enable direct access sites under development? Yeah, sure. So if I go to preferences in advanced, there is a button here that says enable direct access sites under development. And what that means is our direct access provider basically has some connections to some banks that they kind of consider beta. And usually they don't work. And so, that's why I believe that preference is turned off by default. But if you are looking for your bank in our list of supported banks and you don't find your bank there, or maybe you find that you can set up your checking account but not your credit card, you could turn that on and see if it shows up. If it does, there's a significant chance it won't work right away until they move that out of beta. Stephen asks, I use 3 accounts within iBank 7, but only one of the accounts actually autofills. How can I rectify this? I guess that you should probably go to support. That seems weird. That seems very odd. When you edit a transaction, when you create a transaction, I would expect it to always autofill based on that list of payees. And the exception being if an investment transaction, right? An investment transaction doesn't really have the notion of a payee. It knows more about a security or something like that. Somebody says restaurants, due to tips, I could manually put in my amount and a note, and when direct access gets to it, it overwrites my notes. I wouldn't expect that to happen. Let's just take a quick look here. Let's recreate this transaction. So here I'm entering a Apple transaction. And I'm applying my note. This is the Apple transaction. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to import my file. And I entered the wrong amount. $24.99. Whoops. Oops. Try this again. Get out of here, Apple. Let's import that file. The notes. I wouldn't expect the notes to get blown away. It doesn't seem right to me. Yeah, so it matched it, but the notes stay there. So that should be working. You should be able to go to a restaurant, enter in the amount that includes the tip, add the notes, and then when it finds if and when it finds that match, your note should stay. Is there a quick way to clean up your old payees? There's kind of only one way to do it. Whether it's quick or not, I guess, is up for debate. You go to View, go to Payee Schedules and Rules, and here is the list. And you can, select these, and you can delete a whole bunch, or you can double-click one to edit it and change it to what you want. But that's about it. I want to go back to Paul's asking about the mortgage example. And he's saying, hey, with your mortgage example, the process assumed the interest stays the same. Mine's fluid. Yeah, the app calculates the interest dynamically for each post. So I don't remember what, after February rolls around and I want to post the next scheduled transaction, it won't show up here now because I already posted it. But it'll recalculate how much goes to interest and how much goes to principal, and so yeah, it keeps track. It should keep track of that accurately. Let's look for some more here. Somebody asked, Banktivity doesn't recognize some small stocks. Is there a workaround? I assume this is Sherman. I assume you mean downloading stock prices, and the short answer is no. You'd have to enter those prices in by hand. The easiest place to do that is if you go to Portfolio, and you can see the price of each stock here. And if it's gray, it means we don't have a price for whatever day is displayed up here. So today is Tuesday, and so you could just enter in, hey, this stock I know is this amount. As you import transactions, it also will it'll also help fill in the gaps of the stock prices. It tries to do its best there. Mauricio asks if direct access or manual download of bank transactions is available in Mexico. How do I know if I can download either with DA or manually? The list of published banks is not searchable outside of the app. So the best thing to do is let's pick this checking account here. Would be to, let's say you already have the account set up in Banktivity. You would just double click it and then go to configure connection. Hit find my bank and then look for your bank. There are several banks in Mexico that are supported. As far as if your bank supports exporting of the files, I think the only way to know would be to log into your bank's website and try and find how they export and look at the different options. Wilfred asks, when importing into an existing account, how far back in time will Banktivity go to look for existing transactions? I don't remember the exact number of days. offhand. I'm sorry. I think it's probably, it's like 5 days, 7 days. It might maybe 10 or 14. I think that's getting a little bit too far out there. I don't have that exact number in front of me. Brad asks, hey, I'm concerned about all my bank account passwords being centralized in one place. Is direct access susceptible to hacking? Is it more secure to just do all your transactions manually and download them as files and import them? I'm going to say, yeah, it is more secure to manually download your transactions. Absolutely, because you don't have to share a password. That being said, our backend provider is Yodlee. They take security very seriously and have a huge amount of security protocols and security protocols in place, and they get a lot of audits done. You know, I've been using it for years and years and years, and I've never had an issue. I don't know of them having any security breaches. So, hackers can be amazingly good, right? And so I'm not going to. I never say something is 100% secure, because that's just not. That's just seems never to be the case. So I think it's what is your comfort level. Manpreet asks, which banks in the UK does Banktivity connect to at the moment? And does it work with two-factor authentication? Well, the short answer right now is Banktivity doesn't connect to any UK banks. We are working on that for sometime later this year. And as far as two-factor authentication, when a site requires two-factor authentication, you'll get a dialog within the app that says, hey, enter in the text message that we just sent to you, or answer this security question. So there is an interface in the app to do that. Somebody asked if I'm going to be going over Masterclass investments in the future. Yes, I'm going to. I was going to give that a whole section within a session, if not the entire session. I will point out, some people saying, why haven't you answered my question yet? There's, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people here, and there's a ton of questions. I can't answer them all. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best to answer some. Joseph says, this is the third week you've ignored my question. Sure, almost everyone has the same problem with Amazon purchases. Why don't you address it? There's actually not a question there. So my guess is that you're referring to, people buy a lot of different things at Amazon, and how do you categorize it? The best answer I have is, yeah, you got to look to see what those are and do your best to categorize them. It's not going to, I don't know a magic way to know. Hey, when the last time you bought something on Amazon, it was a pair of shoes, and it should be clothing and not a new broom, and it should be household. The app is really good, but I can't overemphasize enough. Like, it's not total autopilot. You gotta keep an eye on what's coming in and clean things up and help yourself get the most out of it. Frank asks about direct access to Target. Hasn't been working since last November. I've seen this issue come up several times. My understanding is that Target is blocking our backend provider from downloading transactions. There's nothing we can do. You could, the drastic thing to do would be like, all right, well, I'm going to go with a different credit card, or reach out to whoever is handling that credit card for Target and tell them you want them to allow third parties to be able to get the data so you can manage it. Mary Carroll just wants me to show how you'd highlight multiple transactions to batch edit. Sure. So this is real common, for for, most Mac apps. If you don't push down any keys and you click you click an item, just the one item is selected. If you hold down the Shift key and select an item lower down, it selects everything in between. If you want to just select individual items, you hold down the Command key and just select the ones you want. Neil wants to know about connecting to Apple Cash accounts. No, not currently. All right, yeah, I believe I don't know the details if they're blocking our backend provider from connecting or not, but I do know that you cannot connect automatically, but you can export an OFX file now and get that. Don asked about merging payees. There is not a way to merge payees. He says the example is, I have at times typed one wrong and it's forever in the system. A 2-word payee, and one has a double space between the words and the other is only a single space, right? So this would be something like, I had one item here that was Grange Co-op. And so let's say you want it to be Grange Co-op, but then the next time around you type in Grange Co-op, and then maybe after that you type in one that's Grange Co-op with a hyphen, and then you go to the payees and you realize, oh my gosh, I have 3 different payees. That won't be the case, I don't think, with this example, because I'm editing the same item. Yeah, so this one just updates to the last, but to answer your question, there's not a way to merge them. I would just delete the ones that you don't want. That's the best solution I have right now to offer you. George asked about if the new subscription, this is kind of off topic, but I see it come up a lot, so I do want to address it for anyone else who's wondering this. If I use the subscription to Banktivity, is Banktivity on your servers, or does the app reside on my hard drive's previous versions? So the app resides on your hard drive, as does your data file, resides on your local computer, just like previous versions. The only time your data, leaves your computer is if you were to set up, our cloud sync to monitor your finances across multiple devices. But we didn't change the architecture of the app between 7 and 8 with regards to, where files are stored and that sort of thing. All right, I'm going to try and find written on to an hour and a half, which I think is plenty. Somebody asked, how do you delete an account? This is something that is good to know. So this will be my last question. This is from William. We've made it a little bit difficult because we don't want people to do it by accident. For example, you can't just hit the delete key. That will say, hey, do you want to delete this transaction? So to delete an account, you select it in the sidebar, hold down Control, and go to delete money market account. So that's what's selected here. Okay, I'm going to wrap up there. It's been an hour and a half, which I think is probably long enough for all of us. Thank you all very much for attending, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a good rest of your day.